What is strength in Jujutsu Kaisen? JJK has explored the theme of what strength is really since pretty much the beginning of the story. We've seen incredible feats from characters like Toji, Kinjaku, Gojo, and Sukuna, just like we've seen the importance of their ideals to reinforce that. Selfishness, loneliness, even love, and other angles have been used to tackle the complexity of what it means to be strong in this story. So, what is strength in Jujutsu Kaisen? What does it mean to actually be strong? In a story that is constantly setting the bar higher with abilities like infinite mass and true spheres showing up like it's nothing, and with all the attention on the strongest, it's easy to get wrapped up and not give much thought to what is being strong in the first place. Because yeah, in part, it is having a strong curse technique and the correct mindset, but I don't think it's really that simple. Are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? Or are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? Like I said, this is an analysis of what strength is in general and not what it means to be the strongest. But I want to use Geto's logic to get closer to the answer, as I believe he was right on point. Is your identity defined by your strength, or is real strength a result of one's identity? And the answer to this by itself could be a whole 40-minute yap session, as I think this touches nicely on human psychology and really raises awareness on the importance of self-reflection. But in summary, I believe identity defines strength, and not the other way around. And that's why Geto's words had such an effect on Gojo. How strong are you really if you cannot manifest your desires? And what's it worth possessing strength if you're unable to get the most out of it? Well, if you ask Sukuna, the absolute peak of strength comes from casting aside your humanity, your regard for everyone else, ridding yourself of any human emotion, and with it, any potential vulnerability. And though he's yet to be proven wrong, we have an idea of where the story's headed. Meanwhile, he's only really been confronted by those very much clinging to their humanity, at least until most recently. Gojo wanted to know if he was the only one burdened with solitude for being the strongest. Yorozu wanted to show Sukuna that through defeat, he could know what it feels like to relate to everyone else. And Kashimo wondered, how could Sukuna possibly connect to others when he knows nothing of weakness? Similar to Yorozu, Kashimo questions just what exactly does Sukuna know about love. Love here is used to convey the human element between some of the strongest sorcerers. In the eyes of Yorozu, showing love was reminding someone in Sukuna, who left his humanity behind, what it means to be vulnerable again, like everyone else, taking away his loneliness. Just like in the eyes of Sukuna, love meant giving the time of day to those that proved themselves strong enough to oppose him, inadvertently doing to everyone else what Yorozu wanted to do to him. And Sukuna's aware. He admits as much to Kashimo, pretty much, when he tells him that the people that challenged Kashimo seeked validation, and Kashimo responded to that by giving them the attention they asked for before ultimately striking them down. And you guys gotta remember that we're talking about people from ages ago with a really archaic way of thinking. So, Sukuna circles back to Kashimo's question of how could Sukuna show love to those beneath him, answering that if that isn't love, then he doesn't know what is. And he clearly states that he very much knows about love, he just deems it worthless. But, is that strength? Because look, Kashimo and Yorozu are pretty damn strong, so let's not get carried away here. It's impossible to not bring up love and its relation to strength. It's the same reason I mentioned Geto's logic. Love, like selfishness and loneliness, is an expression of identity, something we know that strength cannot be defined without. It's why I think this is all worth looking at when analyzing the meaning behind being strong in this story. And it's very interesting how Kashimo's other questions mirror Geto's. Now, different circumstances, different context, but the root of the question is the same. Kashimo asked Sukuna if he was born the strongest, or if he earned such title. But also, and more importantly, he asked, is solitude strength, or is solitude the result of constantly getting stronger? Here's the thing. Sukuna has been firm in his ways for the longest time. He casted aside his humanity, like I said, a long time ago. So while Geto made Gojo question what is really behind all his strength, Sukuna doesn't waver. Sukuna disassociates loneliness, love, any human element from strength completely. It's almost like he says, bruh, it's not that deep, when he calls Kashimo greedy and says that him and Gojo ask for far too much and that they would have been better off preaching about all of that to Yorozu. So it's clear that's what makes Sukuna's strength different from Kashimo's, Yorozu's, and Gojo's. But where Kashimo and Gojo struggled with their solitude, Yorozu could never relate, so she found love in striking down those weaker than her. And when coming across someone stronger, she's driven by teaching him about love. Look, I make an example out of Yorozu because out of the three, she's the only one that never felt weighed down by being the strongest. And that explains a lot about her interaction with Sukuna compared to Kashimo's and Gojo's. We understand clearly that solitude is only a burden for the strongest to carry. So how exactly does love relate to strength and loneliness when you got characters like Yuta? But first, let's recap. Kashimo didn't know about love and seeked it through understanding the relation between strength and solitude. Yorozu preached about love, but could never relate to the solitude that comes with too much strength. It can be interpreted that Gojo really learned about love when it was too late. It took him losing his best friend to understand that lack of love leads to solitude when you're too strong, which he later tries to make up for by leading and inspiring his students to become stronger together. Okay, just a sec. I think it's important to say, most of this script was written before the release of Chapter 261, and after some thought, to be honest, I couldn't be happier with how events have unfolded so far, as I think they pretty much back up all the points I make in this video. Let me explain. How strong are you really if you cannot manifest your desires? Geto was forced to understand that, and walks away from Gojo and Jujutsu High when he does. Gojo, on the other hand, comes to understand this later, after his unsealing. Even though Gojo desired a better world for the next generation to grow up in, despite his strength, he could not stop Shibuya, or even the mess the higher-ups made afterwards. It's why, even though Yuta tells him he doesn't have to carry the burden of being the monster alone anymore, Gojo feels the need to catch up to Geto. And Gege's slick, but it's been found by the Japanese community how Gojo in particular remembers Geto's words of how Gojo could do it if he wanted. In this case, talking about realizing Geto's own dream of a world purely of sorcerers, after Gojo thought it was impossible. But the point is, if Geto did what he thought that needed to be done to manifest his desires, after everything at this point, why shouldn't Gojo indulge in that same feeling to manifest his? I think this is exactly what he realizes before he kills the higher-ups. So this is where one Yuta Okkotsu comes into the picture. Yuta's a sorcerer whose strength revolves almost entirely around his love for the ones he cares for. And yes, of course, a relative of Gojo and descendant of Sugawara Michizane, and now maybe even the Fujiwara too. Yuta is widely respected and recognized for using his love for others as fuel or motivation to always do what he must, especially if that involves getting stronger. We see this in JJK 0, and it's later constantly reflected in his behavior around his peers, his humility, and even in battle sometimes. I mean, he literally asked Yuro in the middle of battle if there's anyone she loves to prove his point. And back in JJK 0, something had to trigger his ascension. A catalyst, right? That forces his growth and strength. Geto. And he's the threat posed to the only people he has. Interestingly enough though, at this point in his life, Geto's fully immersed in his ideals. The ideals that made him question Gojo. Ideals that eventually lead to Gojo questioning himself. Might just be me, but it feels like it all ties together nicely. Back to Yuta, love is just not what drives him. It was quite literally the source of his power at first. His love for Rika when they were kids. That's where his power first came from. And Gojo, I think, has more than enough reason to know that love is the most twisted curse of them all. The only reason I bring that up is because I think we've gathered enough evidence to conclude that though Sukuna might disagree and deem it worthless, there definitely is strength in love. But let's put a pin on that for a second. Earlier I asked and answered the question of just how strong is someone really if they can't use that strength to manifest their desires. But this time, let's bring up Nanami. A strong sorcerer, no doubt, even by most recent standards. And also someone still in touch with their humanity. So much so that it affected the way he saw himself and other Jujutsu sorcerers because he understood that they were forever fighting a losing battle. Nanami even tried to abandon the Jujutsu world to chase a normal life and rid himself of the constant pain and injustice that is being a sorcerer. And we see a regular life didn't make him happy either. He returned to being a sorcerer because he didn't believe his work had any significant impact on anyone. In comparison, he recognized that being a Jujutsu sorcerer at least allowed him to make a difference. But Nanami lacked the ambition, haunted by the pain love has caused, similar to Gojo. But where they differ, ideologically, is that Nanami never mustered up the ideal to keep getting stronger. Of course, that's easy for Gojo, right? But Nanami could never use his love to vindicate his strength, like Yuta, and to a lesser degree, like Gojo. And ultimately, unable to use his strength to manifest his desires. Once again, make no mistake, Nanami is strong. That's why I bring him up in the first place, because his love for people is what brings him back after he runs away. It gives him purpose and makes him strong. But push comes to shove, just never strong enough. I mean, when we see Nanami fight with the utmost intensity and truly give it all is when he's actually visualizing his dream of being in Malaysia. Now imagine if he always fought with that level of willpower. Just a thought. Look, Nanami might not be the person that embodies the point I'm trying to make in this video, but I'll tell you what, he was the mentor to that person. It's probably not a surprise to many, but it is Yuji who embodies the true definition of strength in this series. Someone who's been able to use his love, his humanity, to vindicate his strength. But that's only part of why I believe he's the answer. This might be shocking for some, because after all, what is strength then? Ultimately, the way I interpret it is validation of will. Strength in JJK is determined by whether or not one can impose their ideals enough to fulfill their desires. Whether that be helping people or the ambition for endless power, strength can only be defined by your ability to manifest your will under your own terms. I believe Yuji represents this beautifully. In the beginning, it was emphasized how Yuji was a stranger to the world of Jujutsu and lacked any sort of talent he knew of. It's through pain, misery, and constant conflict that Yuji is able to get stronger every time. Granted, Yuji comes from Sukuna, and that helps. But that had absolutely nothing to do with all the times Yuji has gotten back up after being knocked down. Yuji's strength comes from his humanity, like Yuta until most recently. But like Yuta, and like I mentioned before, there's a catalyst that helps propel their respective wills or ideals. In Yuji's case, I'd argue two of them, Mahito and Sukuna. And though there were, and maybe still are, many similarities when looking at Yuji and Yuta, Chapter 261 has changed everything. Sukuna, I think, has now become that second catalyst for Yuta as well. But I think the difference is, for Yuta, this time, his ideals have changed. Yuta was clear about throwing away his humanity if it meant there was a better chance at beating Sukuna, which is understandable because, like he says, someone had to do it. And to be fair, considering all bets are off against Sukuna, I can't really say Yuta shouldn't have done it, but still, because he did, he falls in some very dangerous territory if the story is headed towards proving Sukuna wrong. If Yuta couldn't win sticking to his original ideals without throwing away his humanity, then I'm not sure why I should believe he'll win now. If Yuta has always fought, gaining strength from his love for others, he'll have to prove he can be just as strong, if not stronger, abandoning all that with even more resolve now. Which he just might, I'll be honest. I just don't think so, because remember, so far, only Sukuna has been able to cast aside his humanity completely. Sukuna has imposed himself claiming that his level of strength is impossible without severing all links to human emotion. But I think Yuji is hell-bent on climbing to that level and proving otherwise. Jujutsu sorcerers are not heroes, and like Mahito said back then, this is war. So I'm definitely not saying that lines of morality should be drawn, but it might be worth wondering if Yuta would have done things differently in the first round if there was no plan B. Though, to be fair, it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference. I can't say if Yuji would have done the same thing or not, if in the same position that Yuta was to take Gojo's body, but there's a reason why it looks like he was never told about this. Besides, Ironically, Yuji, despite his love for people, is a monster himself. We've seen it before. Yuji doesn't have to abandon his humanity to become a monster. He has always been one, and it's why he doesn't waver in his resolve or his ideals. I believe Yuji had to overcome much more in his opposition. Him eating his death-painting womb brothers wasn't him doing what Yuta did. In fact, almost the opposite. Yuji was encouraged by the prospect of his brothers living within him by Choso, and also, Yuji has always gained power from eating cursed objects, like Sukuna. See? Monsters. Validating his ideal against the strongest is probably something only Yuji will be able to do. This has already been set up too. Sukuna's thoughts in chapter 248 gives us so much to analyze, part of which I've tried to touch on here. Because Sukuna has shared a body with Yuji, he knows his ideals are for real. And in just 6 months, Yuji went from learning what cursed energy is to damn near mastering Black Flash, as well as learning RCT and Simple Domain, along with the ability to use not one but 2 cursed techniques, all while driven by his desire to save people as a cog the whole time. But what about characters like Yuki, Kusakabe, Meimei, Maki, and Hakari? Though they represent totally different themes in this story, these are all characters who've had their moment and justified their respective ideals at some point, proving the worth of their strength. As long as it's just pain, Yuji Itadori will not stop. To me, this is a perfect example of what makes Yuji's strength different, and it's why the answer lies within him. At the end of the day, selfishness and the desire for endless power can lead to strength just as much as selflessness and love can. It's about using that strength to vindicate your ideals and resolve, because if you can't in Jujutsu Kaisen, then how strong are you really? Thanks for reaching the end of the video. If you like what you saw and enjoyed the discussion, go ahead and check out the channel. I plan to do more analysis like these within the next couple of videos as I keep covering JJK. I appreciate the support, always. Much love and take care. Peace.